My name is Jasandra Nyker. I am a young global leader. I am here to talk about Africa's promise in the renewable energy sector. If you take a solar map and a wind map and you look at the African continent relative to other continents, we have some of the best resources in the world. Solar resource in South Africa, in the Northern Cape of South Africa, is 25% higher than that of Spain, and Spain was considered to be a world-class site. If you can develop solar in certain parts of Africa, you can actually power the whole of Africa. I do think that renewables can be a ticket out of poverty for Africa. It's going to create jobs, it's going to create economic prosperity, and it's actually going to drive economic growth even further. Not only are we producing power, which we are selling to the utility, but as part of our commitment, we're also ensuring that the local community benefits from our projects. Some of the initiatives we are undertaking are women empowerment, rural development, and education. But they're also owners in our projects. On average, they own 5% of the equity in the project, so they'll benefit from the dividends that are derived from these projects. And that's a corporate philosophy across anywhere in the world. That's what we'll do. Solar fields, they're relatively large, but at the same time, solar can also be a modular application, it can be small. So if there is a rural community, you are able to give them access to electricity by putting in place a very small solar field. That in itself is game-changing, and we've seen that in various parts, particularly in Africa and Asia, where there's been no access to electricity. You put in place a little solar installation, and the lifestyle of that community can change. In India, they've got together the women in a community, got them to finance their own solar field, so they've become the owners of it, and they've worked out how they could repay the loan that they took based on the energy that has been derived from the solar field. The women in that community have now basically leased out the energy that they derive from their solar plant to various small businesses. Those businesses have grown, they've employed more people, the women have become entrepreneurs, and I think that model can be replicated globally. However, the sun only shines 8 to 10 hours a day, so what happens at night? There are storage technologies in place, but still the cost of those storage technologies needs to come down in order for solar to be used 24/7. The main challenges we are facing in our projects at this point in time is lack of local skill set, and that's expected in any nascent industry. So what we've done is also ensure that there have been skill transfer programs put in place between our international partners and the local communities and the local suppliers that we're using. We've also looked at how we can actually develop skills, having some engagement with training schools in South Africa to ensure that over 2 to 3 years, people are trained. I think a bigger issue is the lack of competitive financing, not just in South Africa, but generally within the African context when it comes to power projects. As you know, the perceived risk of Africa is significantly higher than the actual risk, and as a result of which, we require a whole lot of additional guarantees in order to secure the financing. We would want to look at different models, and maybe it's private sector to private sector engagement in terms of how we'd actually look at that. It's very difficult as a developer and investor in projects to work in an environment where there is policy uncertainty. Due to the economic constraints that we've faced over the last few years, we've seen change in policy around renewable energy. The feed-in tariff system that many of the European countries put in place really helped in terms of building and deploying projects. However, the cost of that to government was exceptionally high because these were very rich tariffs. At that point in time, it made sense because the cost of production from solar for electricity was very high. Now that cost has come down, and what we're seeing is that many countries have completely stopped their tariff regime, Spain being a perfect example. That needs to come back, but it needs to be sustainable when it comes back. We need governments to come into play and basically say, I will put this program in place for the next 20 years or the next 10 years, and it will be certain. It will not change if my government changes. It is something that is mandated by me and the opposition. That will actually create a level of confidence to attract investment into particular programs. The flip side of that argument is government coming back and saying, why do we need to subsidize this industry? Well, the truth is you're subsidizing the hydrocarbon industry and have been doing it for the last 20 to 30 years. If we don't do something now, we are definitely going to be living in a world of scarcity by 2025. We have to look at energy in two ways. The rural opportunity, in order to basically catalyze those regions into economic zones, as well as the impact in large urban areas. Private sector needs to actually come into play and develop innovative technologies that actually can reduce the cost of production even further. We're seeing that. We need to see more of that. I think every country needs to adopt a renewable energy policy. There is the perception out there that renewable energy is expensive, it is difficult to deploy, it causes problems. In order to get the noise out of the system, it really makes sense if we could get the commitment of finance and energy ministers and their departments to meet, spend a week learning from other countries. What are the lessons learned from Spain, from Italy, from the UK? It's worthwhile learning from someone else's mistakes. It only means you can do better.